convey a de-scoping number that we've been working with AE2S on. And so that can be compared to the proposed communications support services that we're talking about here. So with that, we also have another new services agreement for communication support, and that's 1892. That is a polling company that we have used and intend to continue to use to gather data to support our communications program. So I'll stop there, Chairman, on those two items. They're kind of intertwined and interrelated, and I am open for any questions related to communication support services.
Finance Committee, do you have any questions of Mr. Paulson with regarding item 1 and item 2 under the approval of contract actions?
Mr. Chair, I do have my hand up.
Okay, Mr. Rick, go ahead.
Yep. Say, Paul, Joel, just a question for you on that. We compared the AE2S contract, the reduction of $1.7 million, or whatever the number is. I don't see it up anymore, but the $1.7 million, but that's multi-year, correct? And through the amount that we're contracting here is for 1 year. Do you know how many years that $1.7 million covers? Just give us some context to what we're changing here.
Yes, absolutely. So you can see under the new task order 2, the cost reduction for unencumbered 2020, that's the $787,000. Okay. And then we're also removing future 2021 budget of $981,000. And Paul Barthel, he can help to assist and confirm, since he's been involved in a lot of the discussions. I believe that $981,000 was for the 2021 year communications budget.
You are correct, Mr. Paulson. The AE2S task order 1 had conditional approval for various tasks in there. And so the entire task order is a multi-year task order for lands and other things out until 2026. However, due to the pending hiring of the Director of Communications, it was only included for 2020 and 2021 for the tasks of public outreach and their legislative work.
Right,
and so that's the 981 that you see reduced there for just 2021.
Great, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Paul. Dr. Mahoney, you have your hand up.
Joel is a principal partner on the PR Good, is a gentleman in Holland.
He is actually a subcontractor for PR for Good, and that's Mike Klein. He is located in Reykjavik, Iceland.
So the difficulty I see with this contract, you have legislative support, additional political consulting, content development, speaking opportunities, media relationships with somebody who's not even close to the Fargo market other than Jennifer. Number 1. Number 2 is, why aren't we using anybody local when we got criticism from the legislative body for jumping to Minnesota? Is there nobody local that can do this body of work?
If Miss Jennifer Darling is on, she can assist, but and I'll give a hierarchy of that answer, and maybe Jennifer, you could fill in some gaps. What we're looking for here, Mayor, that's a great question. What we're looking for here, Mayor, is a very strategic approach to communications. And so the support staff for our communications director is really being tailored in specific areas of expertise. And so we are looking for folks that have the background and expertise to tackle certain strategic areas and not more of a generalist approach to communications. And I'll let Jennifer maybe talk about that for a few minutes as well, and that might help to clarify our approach to communications.
Sure, a couple of things on that. So Mike Klein is actually originally from close to this region, so he has a really good knowledge on this area and the project. And Joanne Henry with PR for Good is based in Minneapolis, but she went to Concordia College, so she has her hands on the pulse of things that are happening here as well. Part of the reason for Mike Klein being really beneficial based on where he's at is actually covering all time zones. So it's been really helpful for us so far in this project. When we might reach the end of our day here, it's the beginning of his day there. We've been able to hand off crucial things that need to happen to him where he can get started on it, and it's ready to go by the time we're in the office first thing in the morning. So it's been really, really beneficial to have that that global support from that perspective.
Is there nobody locally that can do this work?
Yes, we've been looking for individuals locally as well, so there'll be more that we have on the project from that local perspective. So there's already some things in the works for that, but that is our goal for anyone else who joins the project to be local. Absolutely.
Another question on polling. Typically, political entities don't really poll. Is Bernie running for senator or something? I really am at loss with, we got the money from the legislative body right now, Joel. You've got things going in Congress. You've got things going with the Corps. Why are we exposing a polling for the project? Because to me, at $48,000 to do polling, what are we going to learn from it, and how is it going to change what you do?
Well, thank you, Mayor Mahoney. That's a great question. And so, you know, due to the unique nature of this project, we really have a lot at stake for, you know, a number of different initiatives, including communications initiatives. We have traditionally done polling through AE2S. We have conducted local polls with the city of, within the city of Moorhead, Fargo, West Fargo, and parts of Cass and Clay County. That information has come in extremely useful in tailoring our communication messaging to constituents as far as the information they're looking for, the information they need in an effort to boil down the complexity of this project into understandable content for the purposes of project understanding within the community. We would like to continue to use that approach and use a more professional organization that is tailored and focused on polling in order to create that strategic content that will allow us to message properly, understand where that messaging is going, and understand how that messaging is being received within the communities that are affected by this project and affected around this project. This polling entity will also help us to provide us with additional content as far as data to support our legislative strategy, not only with the state of North Dakota, but with the state of Minnesota as well. And you're correct, Mayor, that we are sitting in a very good spot right now with the state of North Dakota. As we began discussions with 1892, that was, you know, we did not know where that was going to go. And as certain legislators have told me in Bismarck here recently, you know, even though we're sitting in a very good spot, you know, you never know how the ultimate votes are going to come out in the House and Senate. And so we want to be able to have folks that we can access on a time and materials basis, which this is, in order to, you know, provide the information that we need to be nimble and flexible enough to address any challenges that we may have with either of the state's legislative bodies.
When I read the CV on a polling company, it looks like they've been utilized in Burgum's election, and it would look like it's been utilized in several senators and governors elections. If I show those to a legislative body, are they going to assume that we're attempting to do some things. Joe, I'd love to see your polling or what you're going to poll, but whether Chad Peterson's popular in Bismarck or I'm popular in Bismarck, Bernie Dardis, who won it by a long shot. But I get a little concerned about optics of that, of what it looks like we're doing. We're not convincing the state of North Dakota to take a resident vote whether the diversion should go through. We're working just with the legislative body. Shouldn't we confine our local knowledge? Bernie sat down, talked to Dowser, he talked to political leaders. I mean, is there a sense that within our internal team that we have enough knowledge base that we don't need to do polling? I just get a bit concerned about a polling thing, and John Shockley knows we have to be careful not to be a political body that's spending money on things that the legislative people might feel isn't in we're not over our skis, we're in something different. And to have somebody in Holland doing work for us, I also feel that that's going to be criticized.
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney. I have a question for Ms. Darling. Do you have prior work experience with both of these entities, PR for Good and 1892?
Actually, I do not. So I have 1892 was one of several groups that we researched to see who might be the best fit. PR for Good, I have not worked with Joanne Henry. I have done some minor work with Mike Klein in the past, and he is exceptional in his field. He is one of the top communication professionals, I would say, in the world. He's exceptional if you research him online. So I knew the caliber of his work and knew that he would be great help for this project from the time zone and just the work that I knew he did. But PR for Good and Joanne Henry I have not worked with before, but she's actually been an absolute pleasure to work with so far and has been so on the ball with everything that we've needed to accomplish because they're at the skill level that they're at. Going forward, though, the individuals that we would like to continue working with will be local on the project and have that local knowledge here with us as well. So that's something that we are working on.
Thank you, Ms. Darling. I have another. Rick Steen, have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow-up question. On page, I think 19 of the PDF, page 19, we've got legislative support in there for $55,000. And didn't we just engage somebody for like $60,000 for basically the same thing? And if I'm mistaken, that's fine. But that's what that's what comes to my mind. Just that. Go ahead.
Great question, Commissioner Steen. I think to clarify that, we did approve a contract with GA Group for legislative services. Those are folks that are in Bismarck. They are in the legislature on a day-to-day, boots on the ground sort of situation, providing support, assisting in conveying legislators' questions to the Diversion Authority so we can answer those on a timely basis. Given the state of COVID and the inability to have a large contingent of folks in Bismarck at all times, it is the most cost-effective route to go. However, the GA Group is not being engaged for communication support. So, for instance, when I'm asked to testify in response to a bill, usually that invitation or that preparation is only a matter of days in order to prepare that testimony. And so I do prepare that testimony in conjunction with my communication staff and with Miss Jennifer Darling and her support staff. And so that is referred to as legislative support. But we are not asking our communications team to engage with legislators, and that is my job, and that is the job of the GA Group. But they are intertwined in being able to convey and answer questions of legislators, as well as prepare testimony and provide follow-up from a content standpoint. So they're very distinct in different roles. However, they are intertwined as the legislative process is complex and needs, more than just one entity, providing all of that support for our needs.
Are there any additional questions of Mr. Paulson or Mrs. Darling? Ken Costin has his hand raised.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I'm there. I'm sorry, I was having trouble with my mute. Joel, you mentioned under communication support, I thought I heard you say for 1892 that there was some overlap in lobbying of the Minnesota constituents on that side of the house. You also have an open contract for about $36,000, if I'm not mistaken, from another legal firm that's been on retainer for years. Is that an overlap, or are those different tasks?
Great question, Mr. Costin. That agreement with Frederickson and Byron has expired. It expired at the end of 2020. We did not re-up that agreement, so that would be unencumbered from the project. And we will be working with the city of Moorhead and supporting their efforts with the state legislature. However, any polls and data gathered from 1892 would be used in assistance and in support of the city of Moorhead's lobbying efforts on behalf and with the diversion project. It is the city of Moorhead's #1 priority on this legislative session is enhancing the amount of funding going into the flood hazard mitigation program that the DNR operates. And so that is where the dollars are funneled through to the city of Moorhead and the Clay County Moorhead Clay County JPA that will be requesting those dollars through that program. So 1892 would provide the data. We would coordinate that data in support of the city of Moorhead's efforts to lobby on behalf of flood control and the diversion authority with the Minnesota legislature.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I didn't realize that Frederickson and Byron contract had expired, so I appreciate the update.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Additional questions of Mr. Paulson? I'm going to step back and I'm going to suggest that we do these line item due to the nature of the questions. I think that we should probably have an action item on each of these individually because obviously there's a lot of good dialogue and questions that have taken place. So that being said, is there any other discussion on these items, on these two items? Then I would request a motion for item #1, PR for Good, the service agreement for $237,000. We'll address this one separately. Is there a motion? Is there a motion? Item #1 is a discussion item. It fails due to the lack of a motion. We'll move on to item #2, which is the communication support, the new service agreement, 1892 for $48,000. Finance Committee, what is your pleasure? Do we have a motion? Do we have a motion? Item #2, the 1892 new service agreement for $48,000 fails due to the lack of a motion. Mr. Costin, his hand is raised again.
Well, I'm sorry, that was unintentional.
All right, thank you, sir. So we have no action on item #1 and #2. Joel, would you please move on to item #3?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Item #3 is Task Order 26, Amendment 8. This is a Amendment to HMG's current task order for support services for the design of the southern embankment. So this includes local drainage modeling and working with utilities to provide engineering data and design for the Corps of Engineers projects. And this is a task order for $277,220.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Finance Committee members, do we have any questions of Mr. Paulson regarding the local drainage update and utilities subtask for the Houston Moore Group? $277,220. Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Steen.
I'm assuming you two want to take these one at a time as well, so I will move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second, please?
Montplaisir, second.
Thank you, Mr. Montplaisir. It's been moved and seconded to approve the amendment to the local drainage and updates and utility subtask for the Houston Morris Group for $277,220. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Don, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Next order is item number 4. Mr. Paulson.
Yes, item number 4 is task order 6, amendment number 6 for P3 procurement support. So this is would be funding Jacob's 2021 services related to the procurement of the P3 developer. And I'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions of Mr. Paulson? Task Order 6, Amendment 6, P3 procurement support to Jacobs and Company. Are there any questions for Mr. Paulson?
This is Rick or Steen.
Yes,
Say,
Mr.
Joel, can you explain? This is just a carryover of a previous unexpended amount. Is that how I read this?
That's correct, Commissioner Steen. So we are taking Jacob's budgets a year at a time. So you'll see on the next slide of Executive Director approved contracting actions. We have removed from Jacob's a number of items from 2020 budget. And then the task order before you today is to fund the 2021 cash budget through a task order amendment.
Right. So basically, just carry over with an offset.
Correct.
The way I understand it. Okay. I would move to approve TO6 Amendment 6 P3 procurement support for Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Chairman, I'd second it.
Thank you,
Mahoney.
thank you, Dr. Mahoney. It's been moved and seconded to approve Task Order 6, Amendment 6, P3 procurement support to Jacobs and Company, $1,206,084. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Don, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Ms. McCall. Ms. McCall? That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Again, in the last several Finance Committee meetings, there's been discussion and we've requested that as we continue to move forward in 2021, that we be keeping, have a spreadsheet on some of these amendments and some of these changes that are not in the 2021 budget, that we have a cause and effect of what it might be doing to the budget. So I would remind Mr. Paulson of that. And of course, that probably will fall on Mr. Costin and Mr. Montplaisir, but that would be very, very helpful, I think, for the rest of us that don't work with the finances every day like you do, that we have that working knowledge of the cause and effect that it will have. And appreciate that if we could have that at your earliest convenience. Next order of business is the executive director's approved contract actions. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Chairman Dardis. So a number just to report out. So 2 new service agreement advanced work directives. So this is for PR for Good and for Mike Klein for $10,000 apiece. These fell under a subcontract with Jacobs in order to utilize these 2 firms to, one, I think, see how they were going to work out for the program, and 2, to address a few items that were of specific concern in January. So those were approved for subcontract support with Jacobs. The next one is new task order number 2, cost reduction. This was what I referred to earlier as the change in scope for AE2S as far as government relations and communications is concerned. That is not in your packet. That will more than likely be contained within the next meeting's packet for report out. And then the following 2 were unencumbering funds within the 2020 cash budget for Jacobs, one for property acquisition and another for program management services. So I can take any questions if there are any.
Questions for Mr. Paulson?
This is Rick.
Mr. Steen, go ahead.
I did have a question. I'm trying to page through these pages to find it. It was in one of the reduction pieces, Joel, and it had something to do with the resiliency and sustainability piece of the Jacobs budget, I think. And it was one of those changes highlighted, crossed out, and adjusted, and I'm trying to locate that in one of your spreadsheets here. And maybe even know what I'm talking about offhand without trying to find it on the spreadsheet, but it was, I think the final budget number is like 400 some odd thousand on that, or something to that effect. Or does it ring a bell, Joel, what I'm talking about?
I can answer your question, Mr. Steen.
Yeah, direct me to the page if you know where that's at on the PDF. That'd be great.
I am quickly looking myself.
That's what I was doing. I just couldn't find it offhand here.
It is 155. No, I'm sorry. That's task order 4. It is 161.
Yep, I found it just now.
Okay.
Task 5J, there was a zero budget for fiscal 19-20. There was a $120,000 budget, and then now we're going to add to the budget in 21. Isn't this that same topic we had talked about, and we were going to bring somebody on board to do this resiliency something for us, and we decided not to do it? Or is this something totally different?
This is the group. Luceo was hired under us as a subcontract to evaluate the resiliency of the program, to double check on the P3, and then to establish a baseline. That's, again, their scope was also phased in the contract. It was anticipated let me take a step back. The $420,000 that was originally budgeted is the entire contract, or subcontract with Luceo, but it has not been approved or allowed under the task order. There's incremental approvals for the various phases. So the full amount includes all phases. They've only been allowed to work on phases 1 and 2, and phase 2 is the actual baselining of the project. And with the extent of the procurement, that pushed into 2021. And so what wasn't spent in 2020 basically got pushed into 2021 to allow them the option to do that work if it's approved and requested by Joel, by the executive director.
Right. So, yeah, this is where I'm a little confused because I think, wasn't that previously presented to come as a diversion engagement? We were going to engage this contractor, and I missed the meeting where we finalized on that, but I thought the result was we decided not to do that under the diversion authority. If I'm mistaken, correct me, but it seems to me we had some discussion and we decided not to take that course of action. But now we're going to do it through Jacobs. Is that what I'm hearing?
The original intent was to hire them as a subcontractor to Jacobs. And so that was the discussions that were about a year ago,
Right.
January, February of 20. And that was all to bring them on as a subcontractor to Jacobs initially.
All right. And so the action, we didn't take any action as a diversion board to support or?
You approved an amendment at that time to bring them on utilizing this phased approach.
Okay. So now we're asking us to basically increase that phase with this proposal here, adding another 300,000 what was initially approved as for 102,000 maybe?
No, it was initially approved at 420,000 for all 3 phases, but with the phased approval, only phase 1 and then phase 2 was approved. Phase 2 was intended to be completed by the end of 2020, but with the delay in the procurement and the changing of the P3 RFP, that has also gotten extended out into 2021. So the 317 is basically the difference between what was expended in 2020, the 102, from the 420.
So you're saying that we approved the $420,000 agreement?
Correct. So you see on the far right-hand column that 420 has not changed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. Back to you, Joel.
Okay, that is all I have. If there's no other questions on the executive director approved contracting actions.
All right, are there any additional questions from the finance committee on the executive director approved contract actions?
Approved. Mahoney?
This is for information only. Dr. Mahoney, I don't need an action item.
Thank you.
Next order of business is Clay County Joint Water Resource. They have nothing to report. Joel, do you have anything on that? It says the agenda says nothing to report at this time.
Yeah, there was no interim Cass County Joint or MCC JPA approved contracting actions between the last meeting and this meeting. Those will occur when they have their meetings and prior to the next meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Next order of business is other business, the Diversion Authority contracting resolution. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'll recall that this was on the agenda for the prior Finance Committee meeting, and the board tabled it so that Commissioner Steen had a few questions, and I had an opportunity to meet with Commissioner Steen and yourself, Mr. Chair, to go over the questions. I thought they were really good to talk through our process internally about how we monitor contract approvals at the authority. We have a very good streamlined process. And in addition, Commissioner Steen had caught a few items that needed some clarification. I don't think that those items don't substantively change the resolution, but they were good cleanups and adding some definitions like engineer of record and some other items. The substantive change in this amendment is to currently the executive director has the authority to enter into contracts of $10,000 and less and report that back to the board. This proposed action is to increase that amount to the bid threshold, which is $200,000. Originally, this was $150,000 when the program prior to the federal injunction, and we were ramping up for the full construction of the project. Once the injunction hit, the board made the decision to reduce that purchasing authority for the executive director down to $10,000 with the note to bring it back to the board when we're back in the construction mode. And so I had it in the background and thought it was appropriate to bring it back to the board now, since we are in fact moving into the full construction phase. And this would restore the original authority that was given to the executive director. At that time, we had the two co-deputy executive directors were making the contracting decisions. The executive director would still have to report back to the finance committee and to the diversion board, but it would just be for those contracts that would be in normal diversion activities. The executive director would have the authority to approve up to $200,000. Can certainly answer any questions, but that's kind of where we're at with this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Are there any questions of Mr. Shockley? This is an actionable item, so Don, would you please call the roll?
Oh, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. Is there a second, please?
Peterson, second.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson is the second. Is there any further discussion? Looks like I got a little ahead of myself. Ron, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Our next meeting will be February 24th. We'll have a notification out as to what time of the day it's going to take place. Is there anything for the good of the order, anything that any of the Finance Committee members would like to bring forward at this time?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Steen.
Thank you. I think we got to go back to that whole communication business, and I'm not sure why that didn't receive a ton of support, but I'd like Joel to readdress that at some point here, because I understand they're going to need to do something, and I think perhaps that my own thought was that the contract was kind of far-reaching and maybe not understood by the majority of the committee why we're doing what we're doing. So I would encourage Joel and Ms. Darling to come back with something that maybe more educate the Finance Committee more, or at least provide us some additional information.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. Great point. Dr. Mahoney, you have your hand up.
Yeah, to Rick's comments, I think a SWOT analysis would help us Ms. Darling, because the question, we're trying to figure out where you want to go or what your vision is. So to the members that sit on this commission, on this committee, it's nice to see where you think we're lacking and what we need to move the ball forward. And maybe we haven't quite seen the vision of where you're headed. So I know you've kind of given us a brief one, but maybe you need to give us a SWOT analysis of what we're lacking, what we need to do, and what we need to improve upon, and why you think a particular company would have helped us out in that. But I think for us, we have to kind of see the vision to understand whether we might support or not. So.
Thank you for that feedback. I'll share that for now, it's just that we're trying to utilize the same services that we had before, just in a little bit different way, because we have the construction phase that we're moving into. So we took away some of those services, and we don't have anyone to do those at the time. So that's part of what it is. But I will definitely take your feedback and bring back some additional information. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Certainly, Mr. Paulson.
Appreciate those comments. Ms. Darling did present to the Public Outreach Committee at the last meeting her vision, and I support that vision. It was received very well by the Public Outreach Committee, and so I would maybe suggest that we do the same presentation at the next Finance Committee meeting, so that the Finance Committee members would also be exposed to the content that the Outreach Committee received as well. That might help to clarify it, but we'll have to make do until that point. We do need our communications program, of course, and so we will come back to the Finance Committee to help to clarify the overall vision at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Are there any other Finance Committee meeting members that would like to have any additional comments?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Mr. Shockley.
It's not really a finance item, but I don't know if everybody on the Finance Committee is aware that the Diversion Authority received the final permit from the Minnesota DNR. So that's positive news. There was a news release about it, but I thought just to share it with the committee since it's positive news. So I don't know, Joel, do you have anything to add?
Thanks, John. No, I just want to convey that this has been a tough road, and we were able to successfully receive the permit that did come through yesterday. Close communications with the DNR, of course. We did work through the night to get out a press release this morning. I did have Jennifer send that out to everyone. You can see there's a forum article as well. A very monumental milestone for the program. To have the Minnesota permit in hand and valid. It's going to unwind the federal litigation and allow complete open construction on the program. So certainly providing the certainty and clarity that we will meet our completion date on time, and understanding fully the requirements of the Minnesota DNR conditional permit is extremely beneficial for our outreach and communications with landowners, which we've been waiting to kick off. So it's going to be extremely important for us to start to engage those individuals and be able to start that communication process with those impacted landowners so that we can provide them the certainty that we've all been looking for all these years. So extremely happy, extremely pleased. Continue to be in close conversations with the Minnesota DNR on next steps, but it does appear that the next step would be to have the DNR make a motion for the release of the federal case, and that is currently in the works. So willing to take any questions. Thanks, John, for bringing that up. Almost missed that great news. So.
I had it on the top of my sheet, but I was waiting for either Mr. Paulson or Mr. Shockley who have been eyeball deep in this stuff to share that good news. So I couldn't believe it went to the last order of the business. So congratulations to everyone on the Diversion Authority for all your years of dealing with the DNR. Great news for us. Anything additional that anyone would like to bring up? A reminder again, February 24th is the next scheduled Finance Committee meeting. That concludes our business and we stand adjourned. Thank you.